Hi, so today we're going to talk about the properties of water. So let's start with the structure of the water molecule. Like all molecules, a water molecule is neutral, so it has no charge. However, it has what we call polarity. So an oxygen atom with 8 protons in its nucleus has a much stronger attraction for electrons than hydrogen atoms do with a single proton. So because it has more positive charge, it wants more negative charge. So there's a greater probability of finding the shared electrons near the oxygen atom than near the hydrogen atom, because it's just pulling more strongly on those electrons. So the oxygen end of the molecule has a slight negative charge, and the hydrogen end has a slight positive charge. This is what makes it polar. It has two poles. One pole is slightly positive, that's the oxygen end, or the oxygen pole, and the hydrogens are slightly positive. So water molecule is polar because there's an uneven distribution of electrons between the oxygen and hydrogen, which causes a slight charge. Like the poles of a battery, there's a positive and negative. There's a positive and negative end of a water molecule. So for example, in this, there's a partial negative charge on the oxygen and a partial positive charge on the hydrogens. So because of their partial positive and negative charges, polar molecules can actually attract each other. So water molecules are attracted to each other. So the attraction between the hydrogen atoms on one molecule and the oxygen atom on another molecule is an example of a hydrogen bond. So when hydrogen bonds to the oxygen, it's a very, very, very weak bond. But because the hydrogen is slightly positive and the oxygen of another molecule is slightly negative, they attract. So hydrogen bonds are not as strong as covalent or ionic bonds, but they exist. So a single water molecule may be involved in as many as 4 hydrogen bonds at one time. Water's ability to form multiple hydrogen bonds is responsible for many of its special properties. So these are the hydrogen bonds between water molecules. So the partially positive hydrogen is attracted to the partially negative oxygen of another molecule, creating this slight attraction between the water molecules, and as you can see, you can form 4 hydrogen bonds. So because of this, there's a couple properties of water that you have to know. First is water's cohesive. It's an attraction between molecules of the same substance, so water on water. Because of hydrogen bonding, water is extremely cohesive. Water's cohesion causes molecules on the surface of water to be drawn inward, which is why drops of water form beads on a smooth surface, like these beads of water on this plant. So this is an example of cohesion, this bubble of water. Cohesion also explains why some insects and spiders can walk on the pond's surface, like this insect. Because the water molecules are sticking together, it forms a sort of net for these insects to actually walk on top of. Adhesion is an attraction between molecules of different substances. So cohesion was the attraction between the same substances. Adhesion is the attraction of molecules of different substances. So the surface of water in a graduated cylinder dips at the center because adhesion between water molecules and the glass molecules is stronger than the cohesion between the water molecules. Adhesion between water and glass causes water to rise in a narrow tube against the force of gravity. This effect is called capillary action, and I'll show you a picture of capillary action in the next slide. But another example of adhesion is water sticking to this plant, which is why the water droplets are not falling off. They're actually sticking to the plant because of adhesion. So an example of capillary action is capillary action is one of the forces that draw water out of the roots of a plant and up into its stem and leaves. So you can see in this picture, if you actually cut a plant and you put it in dyed water, capillary action will take that water and draw it up all the way to the leaves, turning the leaves the same color as the water. So we can see capillary action there. Cohesion holds the column of water together as it rises. So if you can also do this using different tubes for capillary action, and as you decrease the width of the tube, you can see the water actually rises even more. So another property of water is we can make solutions and suspensions out of water. So a mixture is a material composed of 2 or more elements or compounds that are physically mixed but not chemically combined. This means they're not bound together, but they're mixed up together, okay? So they're mixed, but they're not bound. So there's no bonding going on. There's two types of mixtures, solutions and suspensions. So let's start with solutions. All the components of a solution are evenly distributed throughout the solution. In a saltwater solution, table salt is called the solute, the substance that's being dissolved, and water is the solvent, the substance which the solute dissolves in. So an example is sugar water, dissolving sugar in water. We create a solution. So here's the sugar, that's the solute. It's put in the solvent, which is water. When it's mixed together, it creates a sugar solution, which means the sugar molecules are evenly distributed throughout the water, making it appear clear. You don't actually see the sugar anymore once the sugar dissolves in the water. The same with salt and water. So when a crystal table salt is placed in warm water, sodium and chloride ions are attracted to the polar water molecules. So here is your water molecules, evenly distributed throughout the beaker, and here's your clump of salt that you stick in there. And these are all salt molecules. What happens over time is these salt molecules are actually attracted to the slight positive and negative charges of the water molecule. So the water molecules are attracted to it, and they basically break up the salt, okay, and evenly distribute it throughout the water. So ions break away from the crystal and are surrounded by water molecules, as I was saying. So the ions gradually become dispersed in the water, forming a solution. So water's polarity gives it the ability to dissolve both ionic compounds and other polar molecules, such as sugar. Water is the greatest solvent on Earth. So its properties of polarity make it dissolve things, or help it dissolve things. So polar and polar, they mix together, but we'll see polar and nonpolar do not. So polar and polar mix, but polar and nonpolar do not. Like oil and water do not mix because oil is nonpolar and water's polar. But water's polarity is what gives it the ability to dissolve lots of substances. That is why water is called the greatest solvent on Earth. And it is the universal solvent, and if we look at the amount of water in the human body, it's approximately 70%. The brain's 80.5%, lungs are 80%, muscles are 75%, blood's 90%, kidneys are 82%. So water is important because it's essential to sustain life, and we all know we should be drinking 6 to 8 glasses of water a day. The main reason are, if our body water level drops, our performance drops, and we feel tired. Water helps to purify the blood. It reduces stress on the heart and the stomach. It cleans the body's own filtering system, so it helps clean out your kidneys and liver and makes it nice and not toxic. It promotes removal of body toxins, allows for better circulation, and flushes impurities from cells. Okay, so the second one is suspensions that we're going to talk about. We just talked about solutions, now suspensions. Some materials do not dissolve when placed in water, but they still separate into pieces so small that they don't settle out. The movement of water molecules keeps the small particles suspended. Such mixtures of water and non-dissolved material are known as suspensions. So dirty water, dirt and water, muddy water can be an example of a suspension. The mud doesn't actually dissolve in the water, but it's kind of just suspended there, making it look cloudy. So some of the most important biological fluids are both solutions and suspensions. So an example is the blood that circulates throughout your body. It's mostly water, which contains many dissolved compounds, such as salt and sugar. Those are things that are in your blood. And because your blood is made mostly of water, they're dissolved. But it also contains cells and other undissolved particles that remain suspended in the blood as it moves throughout the body. So this is your blood. It's composed of plasma and cellular components. The plasma is mostly water. It contains proteins, nutrients, hormones, and electrolytes. And a lot of these components of the plasma are actually dissolved substances. And then the suspension part is the cellular components, the white blood cells and the red blood cells. They're suspended. They don't dissolve in the blood. So acids, bases, and pH. So a water molecule can react to form hydrogen and hydroxide ions. So here's hydrogen ions, H+, OH is hydroxide ions. Water is neutral because the number of positive hydrogen ions produced is equal to the number of negative hydroxide ions produced. So when we're talking about acids and bases and neutral solutions, we're talking about how much hydrogen ions it has or how much hydroxide ions it has. That will determine whether it's an acid or a base. So the pH scale can help us figure out if something is an acid or base. And this is just a measurement system to indicate the concentration of hydrogen ions in a solution. The pH scale ranges from 0 to 14. So at a pH of 7, the concentration of hydrogen and hydroxide ions is equal. So pure water is neutral. It has the same number of hydrogen and hydroxide ions. So we're right in the middle of the scale. At a 7, it is neutral. Solutions with a pH below 7 are called acidic because they have more hydrogen ions than hydroxide ions. So below 7, these are all acids, and they all have more hydrogen ions than hydroxide ions. So the lower the pH, the greater the acidity. So a 0 acid or 1 or a 2 is a very strong acid. Solutions with a pH above 7 are called basic because they have more hydroxide ions than hydrogen ions. The higher the pH, the more basic the solution. So as we go up, this is more basic, so they have more hydroxide ions and less hydrogen ions. So acids, an acid is any compound that forms hydrogen ions in solution. Acidic solutions contain higher concentrations of hydrogen ions than pure water and have a pH value below 7. So here's low pH, equals lots of hydrogen ions. So like a 2 or a 3 is lots and lots of hydrogen ions, very few hydroxide ions. Strong acids tend to have pH values that range from 1 to 3. An example is hydrochloric acid, produced by the stomach to help digest food. So here's normal stomach acid is around a 2. It's generally between a 1 and a 2, and it's very highly acidic. Most other places in your body, like your esophagus and your small intestines, have a neutral pH. So bases is a compound that produces hydroxide ions in solution. Basic or alkaline solutions contain lower concentrations of hydrogen ions than pure water and have pH values above 7. So here's lots of hydroxide ions equals high pH equals a base. So this would be an example of a basic solution. Strong bases such as lye tend to have pH values ranging from 11 to 14. An example, lye is used to make soap. Buffers. So the pH of fluids within most cells in the human body have to be kept between 6.5 and 7.5. If you change that, chemical reactions in your body cannot occur and your cells cannot survive. So what do? You end up over time, if your pH is too high or too low, you end up dying. So the pH is lower or higher, it will affect the chemical reactions that take place within cells. So controlling pH is important for maintaining homeostasis. One of the ways the body controls pH is through dissolved compounds called buffers. Buffers are weak acids or bases that can react with strong acids or bases to prevent sharp, sudden changes in pH. So your body naturally has these buffers, but you can also get them in chemistry. So you can get strong acids or strong bases or neutral solutions to put in other solutions to either make the acidity go up or the acidity go down. And that is all for today. Thanks for watching.